So Fred, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Fred Wade, class of 22, cohort 18, and I am the Director of Equity, Performance, and Accountability for the Washington State Department of Licensing. I've been there about 10 years now.
Thank you. Charles?
Hello, my name is Charles Wesley. I am also EMPA cohort 18, class 22, classmate of Fred's. I'm currently the Library Technology Officer and Interim Assistant Director of Collections and Access for the Seattle Public Library.
Ian?
Hey, I'm Ian. I'm the Director of the Office for Family Independence at Maine Department of Health and Human Services. And I am I think I was in cohort 19. I forgot the number, but I graduated EMPA in 2021 or maybe 2020. It was the COVID year.
It's all just blending.
It all blended together at this point. I graduated when right when we were like the last class that UW was allowed to have that weekend. They're like, after that, no more.
Oh. Craig.
Oh, Ian, thank you. Thank you for not remembering your class number because neither do I. I'm Craig David, him, but I do remember that I graduated way back in 2015. I'm currently the Executive Director of MultiCare's philanthropy team for marketing and communications. We're called the MultiCare Foundations. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Bessie?
Hi, I'm also happy to be here. I'm Bessie Scott. I'm the Deputy Inspector General for the Office of the Inspector General for Public Safety for the City of Seattle. And I am Ian's classmate. We're cohort 16 and we graduated in 2020.
I was off by a little bit on both the year and the number, apparently.
Well, thank you, panelists, for taking the time to join us and just allowing the prospective students to understand what it is you did and how you managed to work your way through the program. As our program is an 18-month program, sometimes it can be a little bit challenged because we all, as mid-career professionals, have lives outside of school, work, family, children, and so forth. So thank you for taking your time to join us. This event will be a recorded session, and so it will be available for later use on our YouTube channel. And so with that, I am going to open it up to our panel to really understand what made you choose Evans. And so you can just unmute yourself and talk instead of me calling each person one by one. Let's make it more conversational. Who would like to go first?
Happy to go first. Kick us off here. I'm from California and I came up here to do some work in a different field. And I was changing fields and knew that I had experience. And so when I wanted to look into grad school, I thought, okay, well, I'll just go to the University of Washington because, I'm in Washington and it's an amazing school and I've had family who's gone there. And so I was actually applying for the regular master's, and I reached out to the advisors and they told me that, in terms of my professional tenure, I might want to consider the EMPA. And I said, okay, that's interesting. I'd never heard of sort of an accelerated master's for mid-career individuals. But the more I looked into it, the more I knew it would be a really good fit for the experience I already had and where I was going. And it turned out to be one of the best things that's happened to me in my career. So just having that little bit of knowledge, kind of not right out of getting my bachelor's and kind of a little bit down the path in my career, it was a perfect fit for where I was at and where I wanted to go.
I'm happy to go next. After about 20 years in the private sector, I was yearning to give back to community, give back to the world. The focus in private sector is very much on profitability. And after being in that frame for so long, I was just missing serving. And I served in the U.S. Army. I'm a Gulf War veteran, and I was looking for something. I looked at a number of different programs. I looked at a green MBA, and nothing was resonating. And then when I saw this program, I thought, wow, this sounds perfect. It's got the convenience that I need for my schedule. And even though I had resigned from Microsoft, I was in the process of interviewing for a chief communications officer role at Sound Transit at that time. And so it just made a lot of sense, and it resonated with me and my desire to transition from the private sector into government. And from there, I always wanted to also serve in a nonprofit role. Interestingly, before my first class even began, I got the job. Now, of course, I was nervous that I got a new full-time job and I was in graduate school. But the CEO at Sound Transit at the time, Joni Earl, said that one of the chief criteria that she used in selecting me was the fact that I enrolled in the program, because it demonstrated commitment to learning the public sector and learning nonprofit. And that is a critical step, because there's no way I could have gone straight from Microsoft into a government leadership role without this program. So that's my story.
Yeah, I can go next. So I chose Evans because it was the best program for my role in state government. I've been in state government for quite a while, and I was looking for a program that was kind of tailored to the role that I had in state government. And the schedule was very compatible with my work-life balance. And this was the only program that I could find that actually specialized in the field of public service and public administration that met my needs for cost, reputation, course offerings, as well as academic excellence. So that's why I chose Evans.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. Definitely echo the reasons that folks have shared so far. I've been working I was an executive director at a nonprofit for, I think, about 8 years at the time when I was applying for this program. I live in Maine, and I completed the program while I lived in Maine. So this was a far trip, but my brother lives in Seattle. And so when I was visiting him once, I was just checking out UW, and I stumbled across the program. I was looking at trying to do a master's program at that time. And by no means was looking at doing a master's program on the West Coast. But when I saw the way the program was structured, the schedule, it really was the best fit for me. There are similar programs on the East Coast that I try to do, but they were like, they were like nights in the week. Like there's a lot more travel that I didn't want to do nights. So having an opportunity to be in a cohort was really appealing. And being able to do that, on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday once a month was a much more manageable schedule than trying to figure out doing night classes, or at the time doing an online program was probably maybe less popular than it is today, but I really did not want to do an online program. I wanted to be in a cohort, get to know from the people I was in the program with, as well as from the program and the professors. So kind of all those things put it together made it the best program for me. And there's a couple of us, I think, that there's like probably around 5 of us that flew in for the program basically, or that traveled from a long distance. And that model still worked out really well for me. So thanks.
I think from my perspective, a lot of what drove me to it was just the time, the period. So our cohort started during COVID. And so I had been considering a master's program for a while, and the work-life balance was a big question mark. And so when everybody wasn't going anywhere, I had lots of time. And so I thought grad school would fit. But also, that period of time was really, I think, underscoring for a lot of us the importance of public service and how important work in public service is to a healthy, functioning society. And so I was very motivated to study and grow my public service career with intention and rigor. And so as I was exploring programs, I was really struck by how the curriculum and the structure of the EMPA program seemed to be very well aligned with that outcome in mind. Also, in the Puget Sound area, there are a lot of Evans alums in government and public service. And so in my working career, I have worked for and worked with folks who have been through this program. And I have always been impressed by their leadership. And I've seen the value of the community that Evans alums have. And so to build those relationships, make connections, and to have community with peers was a big motivator for me. And then lastly, my career was in higher education and in local government. I'm an IT person. I wanted to expand my government and nonprofit perspective. I considered going into an information management type graduate degree, and I wanted to do a leadership and public service focus to get me out of that IT bubble. And so that other element of the Evans School program really spoke to me, and in what my experience in the program really proved to be very valuable.
Thank you. So I am just going to take a moment to introduce Dr. Barnhart. She is our EMPA faculty director. And so I'll let her say a few words before we continue.
Hi, everybody, panelists and guests. Yeah, my name is Erica Barnhart. I'm an associate teaching professor here at the Evans School. I am also an alum of the Evans School, so long and many connections. And I'm happy to, as we go through the alumni are always the ones who have the wealth of information that you want in your decision making. But if you have questions about the curriculum or anything else, I'm always here to answer those. So thanks, it's nice to be here with you.
Thank you. So I'll ask the panelists, because as you were in the program, you were really navigating your work-life balance. And so how did you find time to manage your schedule as you were in the program? How did you find that?
I can get started. So for me, I knew I had to set up a system for myself to ensure that I could have a work, school, and life balance. And so I just set up a time for studying and completing homework before the in-person classes. But I also set up time for mental break time where I could enjoy extracurricular activities, because I still want to be able to, do the things I like to do for pleasure and enjoyment, like going to the symphony and going to the opera, going to Husky football, of course, or Husky basketball. So I set aside time, just for mental break time as well. And of course, I had a full-time job, and that had its own schedule and its own challenges. But in the afternoons, for 2 hours every day, I promised myself that I was going to do homework and prepare for class for those 2 hours. I didn't want to do the, 5, 6, 7, 8 hour long nights and all that stuff. I was not going to do that. So I committed to doing 2 hours every day after work, 2 hours of schoolwork every day after work. And my goal was always to be a full week ahead of the deadlines and ahead of the class. And so, I've always had a strong work first and then play later mentality. So that actually fit well for me in this program. So, students have to figure out a student schedule that works for them to establish their own work life and school balance. But I also tell people to remember that most grad programs are only 18 months of your life, and it goes by very quickly.
Well, Fred, I commend you. You were highly organized and focused. Mine's more of a cautionary tale of what not to do. So after the first session, I decided to cram the weekend before everything was due, and I strongly advise you. The benefit, though, for me was that the work was absolutely relevant to my day job. So I didn't feel too bad, and my boss knew. I would take a couple hours during the work week, during work hours, and work on projects for the class because they were directly related to the work I was doing. And I was able to meet with colleagues and peers like our CFO and even our CEO and talk about the assignment and get their thoughts. And that helped me on the homework front. So I love Fred's approach. Don't wait till the end. Incorporate a little bit every day, and you will significantly reduce stress and improve the quality and, frankly, the retention of the subject matter and the applicability into your day job. At least I did. It took me a couple assignments before I figured that out, but I got it by, I think, month 3.
Well, I changed career fields 1 month, and then I started the program the next month. So I've been doing housing enforcement under the DOJ for almost 8 years. So homelessness reform and affordable housing, fair housing enforcement, and work for the housing authority in a quasi-governmental structure, which is why I wanted to get into public administration. And then I switched completely to policing and criminal justice reform 1 month before my program started. And so having subject matter expertise in one area and going into a different field and starting grad school, I'm not sure I would suggest that to anyone. But what I did during the interviewing process for my job as policy director of the Community Police Commission was letting them know up front that I was going to be attending grad school. And so it very quickly became evident that grad school was going to help me do the job. This program in particular was strategically and like divinely aligned to the Community Police Commission's mission and their need for structure as a new commission. And so working it out with my boss and being really transparent about my work needs and my schedule was really, really helpful. And I had a little guy at the time, he was 3. So that was just, it was really wild. So we spent a lot of time with the nanny. I think she lived here for, those 18 months and she was awesome. An amazing Italian woman who knows how to make bolognese sauce, y'all. I just want to let everyone know my lunches were bomb. And so I got this extra help. So I think that for me, community is really important. So what is your structure around you who can help you? And like Fred was saying, it's only for a short amount of time. And so one of the things that's so great about the EMPA is that the professors are so organized. You get your syllabus, you know your readings for the entire class that you're taking. And what I did was I divided up the readings by the days before the cohort weekend, and then I use that time. So I had, this night I'm going to do these 2, and I would kind of backwards map the time with my assignments. And so I had a late nighter, my little guy, and so he'd be to bed around 7:30 or 8, and I gave myself 8 to 11 to do my homework, 3 nights a week. So by the time I got to class, I actually was prepared. And that schedule really worked for me. And then once I got into the cohort, one of the great things about having a class is that you have classmates. and they make everything more fun, as Ian will tell you. And so, you can call them, kind of workshop things. You're not alone, and there's a camaraderie. I'm not sure what you all do to make sure your cohort is like just in love with each other, but it's magic. And so you get an automatic family. Your family just kind of gets bigger. And so by the time you're, a few months in, you have study buddies, and techniques and tips, because everybody has a different approach to learning, that help you kind of get through it with a lot of joy. And so for me, it was definitely having dedicated time, on certain days, and looking at that syllabus, making a plan, and then, kind of going backwards from the cohort weekend.
I think for me, it took a couple of like months to get settled into a routine, but I think just finding a routine that works for you that's like my biggest advice. Whatever it is, just kind of pick a routine and stick with it. The first couple of times were just really tough because like I didn't have a routine. I hadn't been in school in a while. I wasn't used to like, I mean, I have to write a lot of stuff at work, but I'm not like submitting a paper typically. And so it took a little while to get back into that uh like sort of style of working again, and just really being deliberate about when things are going to get done. I definitely echo, what folks have said about the structure that you get out of the program. Like it's all one at a time. So you're not looking at like, here's, 18 months worth of stuff I got to do. You're always just like, here's the month ahead. As soon as you get into that next class, they organize it so that you have your like materials all ready to go. It's kind of set up so you like finish one class before the next one begins, and then you get all your readings, and you can really decide when you want to do everything is up to you. You don't have to, if you want to do all of it on the weekends, you could do it that way. If you want to do everything at night, you can do it that way. The deadlines are all set up far enough in advance that you can decide when to do the work. And then I think folks have mentioned, a lot of the work is highly relevant to whatever field you're in. Probably like half of my assignments were basically me making myself better at my job. And I miss the structured time now that I had in this program to do really intentional and reflective work that's not just an hour before something's due and trying to figure out the best solution in limited time. It was really helpful in that way. And then the cohort, a lot of the work that we would do, you bounce ideas off of each other, and you'd be getting not only ideas that are making like helping you in the program, but they were always like helping you in real life. So every time I left one of those weekends, I had learned something, but I also had like figured something out for my job. So I was like coming back to work more prepared than if it was just a weekend off. I also was upfront with, I talked to my supervisor or my boss at the time and was like, this is what I'm going to do. There's going to be a lot of job related stuff. So, I made sure, that I could kind of figure out the best way to navigate both of those things. But I think once I got into a routine, it wasn't very overwhelming. The first month or two was, but once I settled in, then, it worked pretty well, and I got used to it. And just kind of knew this is what I'm going to do the readings, this is what I'm going to do the pre-assignment, this is what I'm going to do the post-assignment, or whatever it is. So
I would really echo what everyone else has said. I found every one of you said something that resonated with me. I think there's a lot of commonality, and also there is difference. Like for me, my school time was Saturday mornings before my wife and son woke up. So that was like my kind of little Zen moment. And I would read and work. And then kind of when the house started to come to life, like, okay, it's time to shift. So it's finding that space in your life, and then kind of making that your habit is that transition. I think the only thing I would add that I think is kind of more was my experience is, I hadn't been a student for almost 20 years. And it was a little bit of a shift going back to that mindset, but it was very motivating for me because, who you are as a student when you're like 19 versus who you are as a student when you're mid-career. It gives you an opportunity to be like, how good of a student can I be now, knowing how much I know? And this is an opportunity to do that. That was really surprising. I wasn't anticipating that, but as I was kind of sitting down and coming up with my plan, I was like, all right, like, let's see what I can do. Like, I'm better equipped. And so I wanted to make the most out of the class. But I also found that the EMPA created kind of like this, gave me this different perspective in this neutral space to kind of think and grow. It was almost like this professional third space where I can have this time with peers who are also in similar stages in their career, trying to learn similar things, but we don't work together. We may not be in the same industry. And so it was this really interesting kind of like town square of people who are doing the same thing as me, but in different ways. And that was kind of an unexpected bonus, but it really did, I think, help me make the time because it did intersect with my day-to-day so much. Especially some of the financial classes, I'd be learning something in some of those classes, and then I'd be talking to the budget manager the next day, and it was super helpful. And it also really helped me make friends with folks because like, wow, you're asking me questions about finances. This is great. And so it really does kind of help, but it is, I think, about making that space and finding a way to make it meaningful to you and sticking with it. And once you find that, then you're in your groove and you just go through the program and then it goes fast.
Professor Barnhart, did you have something to add?
Everything these people just said is true. And I just wanted to note that we've evolved the program format a little bit. And so I just wanted to chime, everything holds. Definitely don't procrastinate. Don't do that to yourself. But rather than each course being over a 3-day weekend and the format of sort of pre-work, weekend, post-work, we have evolved to a hybrid format. And so we do come together in person throughout the course of any course, but we also meet virtually online synchronously. And then there's more what's asynchronous work, which just means doing it in your own time and in your own way. And that was really in order to better serve, actually to address some of these the working student wants and needs, to make it even more accessible. So I just didn't want folks who are like have learned about the program as it is now, hearing about these course weekends and being like, I don't remember hearing about the course weekends. We still a little bit have that for sure. Rather than when you come together for a weekend, it's Friday, Saturday versus Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So just some adjustments. And so I just wanted to clarify that in case anybody listening was like, this doesn't sound like the program that Dr. Miller is being talked to me about. It is. It's a little bit different, a little bit evolved, yeah, in that way.
But it is the cohort model that I've always talked about, and how our students come together after being apart for 5 years, 10 years or more, and they pick up where they left off. And I'm sure there's some great stories in the background about your time in the program or trying to figure out different assignments. And so it's always a wonderful opportunity to, especially about the cohort model. And so my next question would be, what was the most beneficial thing that you've learned or experienced during your time in the EMPA program, and how do you apply those lessons today?
To start on that one, there are two main benefits that I've learned from the program. The first is the power of networking, and the second is to not be afraid of your finance people. And so I'll take the first one first. So it takes a super troop of individuals to get us to the finish line with a deliverable. And as public administrators, we have a duty to make sure that what we implement into policy is sustainable. And so there are so many different areas within the authorizing environment where you need to connect. And so learning how to really understand an environmental scan, our SWOT analysis, our needs assessment, our landscape assessment, having those actual practical tools to say, like, who do I need in this moment and who is present on in the surface, and then who are the silent leaders who are actually like influencing, and then how do I get their buy-in. Super important and something that I feel is so invaluable. My ability to, network and to have like intentional and authentic relationships with individuals in order to force multiply is something that I learned, like, and I'm so thankful for in the program. The second is when I went to the Community Police Commission, we were in, on paper, we looked great. But then when I peeled back the layers, we were, bleeding about $40,000 to $50,000 a month pretty fast and trying to avoid being on the cover of the Seattle Times. And so I ended up going from policy director to interim executive director. The executive director left, and that's when we discovered there were these issues, and that there was kind of this avoidance of talking to our fiscal analyst. And so I had at the exact moment I had strategic financial management. And it was so I think serendipitous to have someone say, money isn't scary. And, I like to spend it. I don't like to track it, but I like to spend it. And so somebody telling me, you got to track it too, was really great. And saying, okay, well, I guess the financial people are people like me. And so I remember walking across the street to City Hall and saying, okay, I guess we need help. And they were just so thrilled that we were, in their office and saying, how do we work together in partnership to solve this issue. And it was a couple of quick fixes, but understanding what I was looking at in terms of the balance sheets, um, I'm so thankful to have the course to say, like, this is what you're looking at. Here's nonprofit management, and we also have a fiduciary duty to the public trust. And so the latter part was where I'm like, that's where it resonates with me. So how do I make sure that what we're doing is transparent and correct? So those are two things I learned, and I'm really grateful for that.
Okay, I'll go. Bessie, you struck us all dumb with those stories. I have to amplify Bessie's point, which is especially, this was incredibly powerful for me coming from the private sector. Of course, you value relationships, but at the same time, it's about results, and you're often working within a evaluation model that encourages competition. So you will burn bridges, and that's okay in corporate. It is not okay in the public sector, and it's absolutely not okay in the nonprofit sector either. And that was very strongly emphasized throughout the course. And it took a while for me to deeply appreciate that. And I was even warned when I got at Sound Transit, hey, you can't burn bridges here. Your power is the strength of those relationships and that network you have. And that network is something you'll carry with you for years. And it's been almost a decade since my class graduated, and one of my colleagues or fellow members of the cohort is a Seattle City Council member. Another one is running for Congress. 5 of them I still keep in touch with and interact with and occasionally call for things I need. So building that relationship by becoming vulnerable, opening yourself up, and as a gay man, that's something that is hard initially, but the cohort was managed in a way, like Bessie said, and maybe the selection process had something to do with this, so that it was conducive to trust building. and relationship building. So that was probably one of the most powerful tools I took away, which was how to build long-term trusting relationships. How do you work in a way that builds trust over time? That was number one. On just the academic side, I think for me personally, because I don't love conflict, the negotiations module was very powerful for me to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the opposing viewpoint and then find common ground. And then the process that's laid out on how you do that, that is something I'm still going back to constantly. I'm still going back and checking on that as I get apprehensive about a meeting or something I know where there isn't disagreement, and how can we walk away with a mutually beneficial agreement where neither side gets everything they want, but we do make progress on understanding each other's needs and on getting to a solution that at least moves the ball forward a little bit. So those are the very powerful areas for me and takeaways.
I think for me, a lot of the beneficial things that I learned, I discover even now. I think there are so many facets to public service. And I think in the program, I started to learn how I could play a role in more of those facets than maybe I thought before. So thinking of yourself as more of a multidisciplinary person who can work within systems and not just be a specialist in one narrow area. But also, I think, the intersections of that really manifests itself in lots of different ways. And so I find that, especially in the last few years, I am finding how different topics that we studied play in the real world differently depending on how they interact with each other. And I find myself going back to, okay, I'm identifying some structural and equity issues. I'm also seeing some policy and financial issues. There's interpersonal issues, and we need to build some bridges. So what do I know about those things, and how can I combine them for this thing? And so having that background from the EMPA, I find it to be something that is very close to me on a really regular basis. And I feel like I am more effective at assessing things and being confident in asking people to collaborate and to provide input as a result of the type of collaborative discussions that we had in the program. And so for me, that is the biggest benefit. It is having that broad kind of understanding of all these different facets, having practice, critically trying to apply them to scenarios, and working with people to do the work. That is the work. And so you do the work in the program, but you do that outside of it too. And so it's not something that is just kind of like an abstract conceptual thing. Like it's real, which is great because the people you're working with are in that same real world with you. And so it's very useful inside the classroom and out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say for me, one of the most valuable things was the cohort itself and just my peers, and um, just having that many people that you could, work through challenges with and kind of celebrate things as you went through like whatever's going on each month was really great. In terms of more of like the program itself, the most lasting impact I would say is on having like a disciplined approach to difficult decisions, or the idea of I don't know, like aligning purpose, mission, capacity, values, and all these things in a way where like they don't align, like it's not actually possible to achieve there is no perfect solution, and going through a structured and disciplined process to get at like the best outcome, instead of just like we're just gonna like keep trying, like I know we don't have capacity to do this, but we're just gonna keep trying. Recognizing sort of the need to step back and have a more long-term view and go through a disciplined process to reach decisions, even if it, even like if it's a SWOT analysis or one of those tools that like you may have heard of, you can find out about them super quick. Like you don't have to go to the program to learn about what a SWOT analysis is. But being able to go and use some of these tools and then realize that you have all these different options to do something, but to actually, go through and do that from a disciplined perspective to arrive at a conclusion that feels like it is the most fair or the most equitable or the most, whatever your target goal is, but knowing that it's not like about trying to make everybody happy. Like you're not gonna, every constituency isn't gonna be pleased with the decision. That's not like the framework that's most helpful. So that was I think really helpful for me and just recognize the importance of doing some of that reflective work, as well as the idea. I always thought that that was like the work that like consultants had to do. So it's like, oh, like if I need to do that, I'm gonna have to get a consultant. And now, realizing that that's stuff that I can do, like we don't have to wait to bring somebody on to go and work with some of those problems. Like there's a time and a place for external involvement, but I think there's also a time and a place for internal leadership. So that was very helpful for me.
So for me, I work in state government, and so it's public administration. So of course, every single class that we had, I would basically take what I learned over that weekend and go back to work on Monday morning and start trying to fit the theories and things into what we were doing. So for me, it was a very easy fit. But I'm going to say for me that the most beneficial thing that I learned and experienced in the program was how to work with and learn from a blend of the cohort members, because they came from all walks of life, and each of them brought their own life experiences and lessons that they learned that they had from their different fields. And of course, our professors and the courses were excellent. But for me, I learned so much from our cohort members because they could show me how to actually apply the lessons in real time in different situations. And so that was extremely beneficial for me.
So I just want to take a moment to ask Professor Barnhart, you have some questions. Before I ask the panelists their final question, I have some questions for you. Does the curriculum include aspects of public-private partnerships within public administration?
It's so specific. I feel a little nervous saying yes or no. I vote yes. I would like to hear from others. I feel like, yes, the curriculum does address that. Also, one of the things that I hear from students is beneficial, and we've heard a little bit, is how applied it is, and intentionally so. So if that's of interest to you, I also think there's a lot of opportunities to make that so. So there'll be a certain amount of addressing it from a content perspective and a curricular perspective. And also then if that's important to you, if that's something you want to get out of the program, take every opportunity that, that comes along in order to make that happen.
And I think that's the benefit of the cohort as we develop it, is that you have students coming from the public sector, the private sector, for profit sector.
Yeah.
So there really is that blend, and naturally you will have that public-private partnership conversation with your colleagues in the cohort. Did anyone want to add to that answer? Okay, the next question says, how do you describe the breakout of work that is independent versus group projects?
This shifts depending on the course, so it shifts over time. We do now with the more blended learning approach, we try to be really attentive to, you know, what the breakdown is. But that's always been the case. I don't think that's super new. You know, that we were actually, I was just having a conversation with the instructors for the current cohort for an upcoming quarters. And we were debating the pros and cons of group projects, and you know, these are going to be taught at the same time. So if one is mainly group, and you know, how do you strike that balance? And the other thing that I'll just be transparent about is we're never going to make everybody happy. Like we keep tinkering, and it's just like you end up making somebody different unhappy with the choice. But this program does, I mean, there's a lot of independent work for sure. Also, and the panelists have spoken to this so eloquently, part of what you are learning is the skill of being in community and in collaboration with others as a professional skill. Not as like, it's because I'm a nice person, you are, but really because it's a way to advance mission. And so there is in the background a lot of intentionality, even to like part of the discussion earlier today that I was having with my colleagues was, should they do this in pairs? Should they do it, you know, in trios? So we're always playing around with a balance of independent work, independent thinking and doing, and this collaborative approach. So kind of, and it ebbs and flows over time. But we do lean toward collaboration because we believe in the power of it. And then it naturally happens. Bessie, I have to say, you were like, I don't know if you pick, like, this comes up all the time. When you're like looking at the magic of the cohort is the magic of the cohort. And I wanted to say that out loud because there's something about, and I've heard that so many times, Bessie, that like a variation on what you're saying. I just think it gives us too much power, right? That somehow we know how to curate the cohorts, and the power is in the cohort itself. It's in how you come together in community. It's how you choose to be with each other. Obviously, we're looking for each applicant. We want you to be a good fit for the program, for you as much as for us. But there isn't like this curation that happens in this way that people think. It is the power of the cohort that makes that magic happen. It is all you.
Thank you. So for the panel, looking back, what will you say to your younger self as you are about to enter the program? Any thoughts, any suggestions that you would give your younger self as you decide whether to enter the program?
I think for me, time is a thief. It goes by so much faster, you know, and than you realize. And so enjoy, you know, the weekends and enjoy the camaraderie, enjoy the readings, because at some point along the way, whether it's, you know, 6 months after you graduate or, you know, 12 months, it's going to come back. You know, there's something to be said about managing. And I will tell you, as an chief of staff and now, you know, inspector general, the article about how to work with millennials always pops into my head. And it's so random. And then it's there are times where I'm in really big task force and I'm thinking about the book One Mission, you know, and I'm like, okay, how can I get everybody to the same side? And there's strategies that come in. And so there are things that are so deep in my core from the learning. It's like you actually metabolize the learning because the interventions are timeless. And so it will always resonate with you. It's one of the best investments I've made in myself.
I guess I'd tell myself to spend more time building relationships with the cohort, because the cohort will, you know, there's always that person that'll organize outside of class, fun time. getting together, and you're so busy, you're so stressed. You'll always find an excuse not to participate in that, but you really, really should, because that's what you're going to take away for the rest of your life. And I would have said, make those casual get-togethers a priority and show up and be present. That's all I would tell myself. And to a degree I did, but I think I could have done more. But I always found a reason because we're all so busy. So that's what I would counsel my younger self to do.
I think for me, what I would just say is, I think everybody comes into this at a different stage in their career. And so for folks who are already a little more senior coming in, you have one perspective. For other folks who are earlier, maybe they're frontline managers, only a few direct reports, which was me coming into it. You feel a little imposter syndrome, like you look around the room and you're all like, can't believe they let me in here. Like you're gonna find out that like I'm just a frontline manager, I'm not in charge of anything important. But you do belong there, and these people are your peers, and you're all going to be growing together. So be open to that and find that you have a lot to contribute to, even if you aren't as accomplished as some of your peers, or if you're earlier in your career journey. Something brought all of you into this program together, and that is what your bond is, and you are all learning things together. And sometimes somebody who has a lot more experience than you will say something in class that will unlock something for you, and sometimes you might say something that they look to you and say, oh, I never thought of that. So there is no one type of person who is meant to be in that program. There is no one type of person who can be successful. So be comfortable being yourself and learn and grow, and others will bring things out of you that you didn't know you had, but other people see that in you. And so it's a really good opportunity, I think, to see yourself in that next phase of your career where you're going to be shifting and doing more and more important work with what you learn in that class and the relationships that you build.
Well, I hate to follow behind Charles. Same thing in class. He was always very eloquent. uh, so I'll just ditto to Charles, and then I will also say I would tell my younger self not to stress out so much about whether I belonged there or whether I was smart enough to be there. I've learned, this was my third graduate program, and I've learned that, I would psych myself out, about grad school and thinking that it's going to be too hard and all this other stuff. And for me, it's not that harder than undergrad. It's you're learning differently. The research is heavier, but you learn how to take that research and synthesize and evaluate and apply it in a different way. And so for me, the hardest thing is, of course, shortening up my papers, because in grad school, I could go 20 or 30 pages, no problem, get my A. But in grad school, you can't write 20 or 30 pages. You're usually confined to 2, 3, or 4 pages. And so it's figuring out how to take all that knowledge and those theories and that research and succinctly put it into a context that's usable. So I would say, yeah, don't psych yourself out or stress yourself out thinking that it's going to be too challenging for you.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I appreciate that. I think it took me like a third of the program or something around there where I was like still psyching myself out or stressing myself out like unnecessarily about it. And then, it just goes by really quick. So don't spend a third of the program being stressed out unnecessarily about, things that are like totally fine. I also didn't really like, I think you can ask, I was out of town, so maybe I didn't ask as much. I didn't like interact as much with Evans, but there's support there too if you need it. I would have taken a little bit more advantage of that. And then I would also sort of I went into the, program with the idea that I, was looking to make a career change, trying to like sharpen some skills, all that. I spent a lot of the program like working on stuff that was like relevant for my current role, like when I was in, because that was what made sense to me. And I think I would have spent a little bit more time thinking about like where I was trying to go and like doing things that are deliberately future oriented and less present oriented. It's an easy, like if you're working to almost everybody, I think there's one person who wasn't working, but everybody there is full time. Like it's very easy to be like, all right, I'm gonna do this project about decision making. I'm gonna do it about a decision that I have to make. But I think doing it about something that's like envisioning yourself in that future role and future decisions you have to make is also a valuable perspective to come into this. So thanks.
In the 1 minute that we have left, we had a question, and the other one I think we may have to do offline. But it was, how did you brand yourself to advance your career while you were in the program? Does anyone want to take like a minute to answer that question? I know Sanat was really waiting, and I wanted to give us an opportunity to answer her question if possible.
Well, I took a stab at it in text and just said that on my LinkedIn profile at the time, I listed that I was in the program, and I listed that I was pursuing leadership development across public and private sector. And that's something I've kept on forever, actually, because I think that's an interesting attribute to have that perspective across those three different areas is important. And it's always been important to me. And I've heard from hiring managers and staff that it's important to them as well. And it's driven some inquiries. People reach out and they want to know about the program. So that's how I did it.
And why did anyone choose the Evans EMPA program as opposed to a related certificate or another program at the UW that was less expensive? And that's our final question.
For me, I looked at all the programs, including Evergreen, and I just like the reputation of Evans, but I also like the coursework. I think it just spoke to me more, and I like the pacing of the program. I felt like for the cost, it was worth it, and the caliber was really kind of unmatched for me.
Well, thank you, panelists, for taking the time to share your expertise and your knowledge with our attendees, as well as it's going to be posted in other spaces so that our prospective students will still continue to learn from you, not just from this hour, but as we push out content about the EMPA program and your experiences. And I wouldn't know the experiences without having this conversation with you and really understanding why you chose the Evans School and how has it helped you in your career trajectory. So panelists, thank you for taking your time for us this evening, and that will conclude our panel discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.